We will be debating how to retire, traditional versus the FIRE lifestyle. Your moderator for this debate will be Jack Howard with Ally Invest. Also from Ally Invest will be Nicole Cope. She is the Senior Director with Ally Invest Advisors. And our guest today will be Chauncey Maddox. She is from My Debt Epiphany, and she is currently living the FIRE lifestyle. So with that said, I'd like to pass it off to Jack. Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Brian. All right, let's dig in. So as Brian mentioned, we have my colleague, Nicole Cope, who is a Senior Director with Ally, and Chauncey Maddox, who is with My Debt Epiphany. She's living the FIRE life right now, everybody. If you've been online with us all day, then you heard our Ally Invest President, Lule Demisay, mention earlier that regardless of our color, our socioeconomic status, our gender, there's one thing we all have in common. We're getting older. And what does that mean? We all have to retire at some point. Now, the big question is when. For some people, that could be at 35 or 45 or 65. It's really up to you. So we want to help you to figure out your number. To kick things off, my colleague Nicole is going to help us to understand the difference between traditional retirement versus FIRE. Tossing to you, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. And so before I give you like a simple definition, if you know me, I'm a storyteller. And so I want to kind of equate this to a story. And so if you all are thinking about a road trip, perhaps we're all sitting in New York City, we're tired of the snow, and we want to head over to San Francisco. So there's a couple ways you could plan this cross-country trip. One is we can make the ultimate goal of this trip to get to San Francisco as fast as possible. Or two, we can plan for some additional stops along the way. Let's talk about these two plans as I think about traditional retirement. So the first plan, to get there as fast as possible, you're going to make a budget, right? You're going to understand how much you're going to spend on gas, on lodging, and on food. You're also going to plan your route. You found that route I-80 across the country is the fastest way to get there. You're also going to say, you know what? I'm all right with sitting in the car for 14 hours a day. For me, it's all about getting there as fast as I can. But what happens if along the way you encounter weather or an accident, right? You may derail your ability to get there as fast as you can. And if you think about this trip in a second way, you want to make sure that any potential derailments are accounted for. So you plan for the weather, you plan different routes, and then you also realize kids bouncing in the back of the car for 12 hours a day probably isn't realistic. So you want to stop at some places along the way. You'll determine where you're going to eat and what kind of budget, what kind of lodging you want along the way. And the reason I say this, Jack, is that the true art of preparing for retirement isn't so much about devising a rigid plan as it is gaining the flexibility to bend without breaking. Often people find that they have to make trade-offs or course corrections along the way. In its simplest sense, retirement planning is the planning one does to be prepared for life after paid work ends, not just financially, but in all aspects of life. Those non-financial aspects include lifestyle choices, such as how to spend time in retirement, where to live, when to completely stop working, etc. So retirement planning is ideally a lifelong process with the goal of being able to live your very best life now and in retirement. So Jack, that's how I define it.
Nicole, I think you stole my heart when you said a road trip to California. I'm in Michigan with a ton of snow, so you have me sold already. All right, Chauncey, I'm going to toss it to you. Thank you for that definition, Nicole. Now, Chauncey, help us to understand FIRE.
Sure. So FIRE is an acronym for Financial Independence Retire Early. And it's basically, I guess it's a movement that is based on, it challenges the idea that you have to wait until your 60s or sometimes even your 70s to officially retire, have enough assets to live. And what we find a lot of people doing to retire earlier in their 30s and 40s is they're saving a large sum of their income. I feel like you have to have a higher income or be able to know how to cut expenses, or a little bit of both, which is kind of what I'm doing to have some balance in order to accelerate your savings. So that way you could build up enough assets and enough wealth to be able to make work optional in your 30s and 40s. And what I love about the FIRE movement is that It just really challenges the, I guess, the idea that we have to be these massive consumers. There's a lot of things that I buy that I realize once I got on this journey, I don't really need, and that aren't really helping me in the long run. I definitely have just learned on this journey. I feel like it's kind of a movement of support. Lots of people trying to attack, not attack. I'd say a lot of people trying to combat just massive consumerism and be able to save aggressively with the idea, the goal of having more freedom and more flexibility in their life and being able to make work optional.
So Chauncey, a couple of things that I heard you say. Saving is important for this. And then you also have significantly curbed your spending. So I want to do a poll for everybody out there. What is your current retirement savings rate? How is everyone saving right now? So it looks like from the poll, what I'm seeing now, we're between 1 and 20%. Am I seeing that right, everybody? So saving looks like it's a big piece of what we're doing. But for this FIRE movement, I don't know if with between 1 and 20%, if people are saving enough. So Chauncey, I know there are levels to this. There's the lean FIRE and fat FIRE. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. So lean FIRE it's going to be great for people who feel like they can live and thrive and feel good on a smaller budget. So this is where we might see, usually you get a FIRE number, how much you want to have saved up in order to reach FIRE. So this is, as an example, this would be someone saying, okay, I need around $1 million, maybe a little more. And, to safely withdraw 4% of that, I'd live off of $40,000 a year. For some people, that's more than enough. For others, it might not be enough. But lean FIRE is where you're kind of just living on a budget. Doesn't mean that you're miserable or anything, but just you're not spending a ton of money. And if you want more flexibility, say you want to spend more, you want to go on, big trips and not have to worry about other things, and maybe you would save a little bit more, which would be fat FIRE. For myself, I find myself kind of somewhere in the middle. I feel like I'm probably not going to need, like $80,000, $90,000 a year to survive and feel good and meet all my needs. So I'm definitely not going for super fat FIRE, but then I don't want to be penny pinching or making sacrifices and unable to actually enjoy FIRE. So yeah, there's different, it all depends on your goal and how much you want to spend.
So I'm hearing, you got to have discipline and have a plan. Chauncey, can you give us more examples of how you're implementing this? You got to save, you got to boost your income, lower your expenses.
Yes, exactly. So I kind of started my journey not really believing I could achieve FIRE because I didn't have much of a sizable income and I had debt. So I focused on attacking my debt first. I knew if I paid off my consumer debt, that would free up more money to be able to put toward savings. And in addition to that, I focused on increasing my income, side hustling, things like that. And right now what we're doing is we're trying to invest and save around 50%, my husband and I, of what we're bringing home and still live comfortably. But again, that we're making some sacrifices, some that I don't see as that big of a deal. But what I like to do, I like to focus on the bigger expenses. If I can cut those, I know I could save drastically. So instead of telling myself I can't get Starbucks or, something small, I'm focusing on my four walls, like housing, transportation, insurance, and food costs as well. So, we're living right now in a ranch style, 1,300 square foot home. We make the best of it. It's not the hugest house, but it's way under our budget, allows us to save. And with transportation, we drive one car, it's paid off. My husband, he has a car with his job. So it's great because I work from home, but if he's going to work, he takes the vehicle that, his boss gave him. So that way I do have access to the car when he's not here. And then with food, it could just get so expensive. So I just learned to meal plan, and I try to make sure that, 80 to 90% of what we're getting at the store, I'm planning on that. And then we still have room to kind of enjoy ourselves, go out, things like that. So definitely trying to use like a spend, save, and give model. So I'm spending on certain things that are important to us, but I'm also saving. I just take it off the top. Every time I get paid, I pay myself first and I save that amount. That way I don't have to feel bad about whatever I spend that's left. And, and then I'm trying to have an 11-year-old son. So I'm trying to teach him also with his allowance and stuff about giving and just, it's not always about us individually, especially going after becoming financially independent. It's also so that you can give and be generous and be able to do that. And just be in a more financially stable place.
So I have a 12-year-old too. So I'm trying to teach him these same things of spend, save, give. And it can be hard. So I commend you for doing that during FIRE. So, all right, everybody, we have another poll. I want to see, what are you willing to give up to retire early? Is it your vacation and entertainment, a new vehicle, home ownership? We know that Chauncey, she just said they're sacrificing with one car and they bought a smaller home. So what things are you willing to give up to retire early? If we can't have everything, you got to pick a few. What are you picking? Okay, so we'll come back to the poll once we get all of the results. Going back to you, Chauncey. So I can see that it requires a lot of sacrifice for FIRE. What's the upside of this? I got to give up a lot. So tell me, what are the benefits?
Yeah. For me, the key benefits are flexibility, just being able to have my time back, not have to be stuck at a 40-hour a week schedule. I feel like I'd have so much more time to do other things, pick up hobbies. There's so much stuff I want to do that I end up putting off, things I want to learn how to do. And I feel like I'd have so much more flexibility. My family and I, we love to take trips and travel. We use credit card rewards to make it frugal. And I also feel like it'd just be less stressful. No commute, having to, go through traffic and all that stuff. And just in general, I think if anyone is considering FIRE, you have to really have a deeper why. Why do you want this? What are you going to get out of it? And that's something to really consider, because it can motivate you. Because for me personally, some of the sacrifices we're making, I don't really feel like they're sacrifices, because I feel like if I had a bigger home, I would be super stressed out trying to clean it. Like, it's so hard trying to clean like my little 3-bedroom house. I couldn't imagine. It'll be nice to have bigger space. Maybe my friends would think I'm cool, but I couldn't imagine having to, clean it, vacuum up after the dog, all the taxes I'd have to pay on that home. Also, I don't really care about cars that much as long as my car runs. So it's not, and my husband and I, we go the same places anyway. So it's not like a big sacrifice to me on that end. But I do think, having the whole family on board is great, especially if you have kids, if they're a little older and understand, they can understand, that we're giving something up for a better, bigger goal. And also that we're keeping some things too for ourselves. So that way it doesn't feel too sacrificial.
Okay, everybody, remember to submit your questions into the chat. And Brian, do we have the poll? Where are the results for the poll? What are people willing to give up for an early retirement?
All right. So I'm waiting for them to kind of roll in here as we're looking at this.
So let's go to ally.com live poll, everybody, and let us know, what are you willing to give up for early retirement? While we're waiting on that, I must say, Chauncey, the idea of retiring early sounds amazing to me, but sounds a little too good to be true. So, Nicole, please let us know, how can FIRE backfire?
Yeah, so Jack, thank you for that question. While I really applaud Chauncey and everything she and her family is doing, it's that financial independence that I can get behind, right? That laser focus on savings and taking control of your budget, living within your means. Where I become a little bit of a skeptic for this is really that RE, or the retire early portion, specifically in these areas we have up here. So there's a couple reasons why I feel this way. The first being the impact of taxes and inflation. Be it traditional or FIRE, many individuals really fail to understand their entire taxable picture. So let me put this into perspective. If you're using retirement vehicles like a 401k or an IRA, in most cases, should you access the funds before the age of 59 and a half, you can incur a 10% tax penalty. So if you think about that, for FIRE, this can make a huge impact on the size of your nest egg. The second part of this equation is it's important to care for your complete tax obligations. So federal, state, real estate, capital gains, and in some states, even personal property tax. And the last part of this is really inflation erodes. Simply adjusting your withdrawal rate, which is what a lot of FIRE proponents talk about, to an arbitrary inflation rate, say 2%, does not give you really a complete picture of your spending power. Necessities have different inflation rates. We'll talk about housing, healthcare, utilities, and education. They all inflated at a different rate. The second reason why I'm a bit skeptical about the ability to retire early successfully is the fact that people and opportunities change. It sounds like in Chauncey's household, all the parties are kind of involved in this, right? And they are all rowing in the same direction. But if that's not the case, if you're in a household where not everyone's committed, I can imagine it really can lead to some severe family friction. You think about the number one reason most couples argue, it's over finances, right? So if you're being super frugal and the other person isn't as engaged in that lifestyle as you are, I can imagine that those conversations could get a little heated. So I'm happy to hear that Chauncey and her family are all in on this. The other reason why I'm a little concerned about this is that really, for most cases, pursuing FIRE can really be inflexible. So you're working toward this retirement number, this FIRE number, but your life circumstances really can change. And you're going to have to be able to adapt quickly. And this may also mean that you may not be able to upgrade your lifestyle as you grow older. So right now that frugality may seem okay and amenable, but as you get older, your differences you may have different expectations. So FIRE really, in my mind, doesn't take flexibility into account. If you think about how you track your progress, you're going to need to know exactly how much you'll make, how much you'll spend, and what the return is going to be on that money. So let me give you an example. If you're a 30-year-old and you have $200,000 saved for retirement, and you want to retire with $1 million by the age of 45, over the next 15 years, you're going to need to contribute about $30,000 annually toward that retirement in order to reach the goal. And this is assuming just a 5% straight return on your money. After listening to Brian's last session around options, we may be able to increase that, but we'll just assume 5% for now. However, this is really just a snapshot of your current situation, and a lot can change over those 15 years as you're pursuing this goal. You could get a better or worse job that pays more or less. The markets could provide greater or worse returns than that 5% assumption. Your expenses can go up, they can go down, you can move, your goals can change. And a health crisis can really change everything. As I think about those who are approaching retirement, sudden health changes are one of the most common disruptors and the one that most people have a difficult time anticipating. So I'm going to share with you all a story. So this story is about Scott and Jamie. They were former clients, a client family of mine. And as they entered their late 30s, Scott was finishing his doctoral program and Jamie was working full time. They finally had begun to ramp up their retirement savings after several years of just getting by on Jamie's income. Then Scott, who at the time was a mechanical engineer, came down with an illness that forced him to stop working. Suddenly, they were back down to that one income. And if I remember those conversations I had with Jamie, they were difficult. She said that she wasn't anticipating Scott's health crisis and that it absolutely changed their lives and their retirement plans. And what they needed at the time was a sense of clarity and a plan to account for all these sudden changes. Fortunately, they didn't have it at the time. So as they discovered, and unfortunately a lot of us will discover, no matter how healthy you and your loved ones are today, things can change pretty quickly. And the key is to think ahead and have a plan in place so you don't get blindsided by this. Now, if we move down this list, the next area where I think FIRE can really backfire is the impact of missing your prime earning years. By doing so, you can face several risks. The first is potentially not meeting those 40 quarters needed to max out your Social Security eligibility, and then having to wait until your full retirement age to draw that benefit, and that benefit may not be the full amount. Secondly, should you find yourself needing to rejoin the workforce, it may be difficult. right? So if you think about that reintegration into the workforce, without having continued experience or development, your skills that were once relevant may not match the current needs of the economy. And if you think about it, job searching, even in the best situations, can be really difficult. And for me, the third risk is that saving to reach FIRE can be really too restrictive in the present. Luckily, it sounds like Chauncey and her family has found that balance. But if you look in the FIRE community, there can be extremes, right? It can be too restrictive in the present. So you may save so much that you never really enjoy your money, or work so hard that you don't have time to relax and enjoy time with your friends and family. So if you think about the core strategy of the FIRE movement, it really involves increasing your savings rate. And there's a couple ways that you can do this, right? So you're limited to do that, either save more money by cutting out expenses or make more money. And believe me, as someone who's a huge proponent of financial planning, neither one of those are bad in theory at all. However, on the first point about being too frugal and saving too much money, it actually, science shows and research shows that it can make you less happy in the present. And it can have a huge impact on your physical and mental health. And Dr. Vicki was talking about that earlier. I am all about cutting out expenses that you don't value, right? That can be very helpful. But spending money on things you value is good too. So if we think Chauncey was talking about, she isn't going to give up her cup of coffee. And I love that, because a lot of times what you hear from some, I call them financial extremists at times, is that you need to kind of give up that coffee. You need to give up some of those things that may bring joy and value to your life. And I hate to think that people are cutting things out of their budget just because like a financial extremist told them to. So I'm really happy that Chauncey, you and your family have found some of that balance and you're still able to enjoy some of the great things about life. The next area, if you think about this, is really around markets and the impact that they can have on the ability to retire. So, you know, the FIRE movement is really based on that 4% withdrawal rate as a theory. And that is great. However, if you actually read that study is based upon a 30-year timeline, not a 70-year time frame that could be for some individuals that are practicing FIRE. Then there's always the risk of a market downturn, especially when you're the impact it will have as you're drawing your income off of your portfolios. In financial planning terms, we call this sequence risk. And so sequence risk is really a danger of timing of your withdrawals from a retirement account or an investment account, especially during a down market. It's going to have a huge negative impact on your ability to grow those assets and continue to grow them over time. And then the last thing I think about when I think through how FIRE and how it can backfire, especially when we talk a little bit about the markets and our investments, is the fact that a lot of individuals who are utilizing utilizing FIRE are also doing that through using low-cost vehicles, right? So they're using a lot of index funds, which is great in a bull market, but can really, really hurt you in a bear market. And by that, I mean you're subject to the full volatility that the market can have over that time. So Jack, you asked, I gave you a couple of reasons why I'm a little skeptical about the RE portion of FIRE.
Thank you, Nicole. You gave us a lot to consider. So in any debate, I have to allow the opposing side to share thoughts. So Chauncey, let us know. What do you think about what Nicole said?
Yeah, I think it was great, all the points that Nicole touched on. And because I think before you make any type of financial decision, you need to carefully weigh the pros and cons and adapt it to your situation and see how it will affect you. But I feel like FIRE is just so non-traditional, and that's what I love about it, because it really challenges you to break the status quo and to save way more than the average person. So from where I'm standing at, I feel like I would be much safer had I had a higher savings rate and then the unexpected happened versus I didn't save as much along the way and then the unexpected happens. Toward the end of last fall, the Federal Reserve put out a study that, not really a study, but they basically found that the average American only has $3,500 in their savings account. And we know that a lot of people are not investing as much. I think it's more Americans own cats than stocks. And I love my cat, but that's kind of scary to me to not be prepared for the unexpected or for certain emergencies. So, and I feel like if you don't have that savings lined up, whether you're working or not, you're going to be in quite a situation. So onto the taxes part. I'm not a tax professional, and I would recommend, that anyone considering any of this talks to a CPA, talks to someone about taxes. But I know that the average retired household, they are spending like 25% less than what they did when they were working. And depending on how much you're living on, especially if you're going for lean fire, you would be in a lower tax bracket. So could help you save on taxes. And also, I feel like just talking with a tax professional and figuring out a strategy, depending on how old you are. I know that if you're earning under around $80,000 as a couple, the federal tax rate is below 20%. My state does have state taxes. So, let's say that you hit fire and you want to withdraw safely or live on like $60,000 for that year. In my state, with the federal and state taxes, you're probably looking at around $10,000 in taxes. So that would bring you down to $50,000. And again, this is without any tax deductions, any credits. What if maybe you're saving in a 529 for your kids still? You can be able to deduct that from your taxable income. But again, this is not, to me, it's not, chump change. I could live pretty comfortably on that, especially if I manage my money well and I don't have a mortgage. So I don't have to pay that housing payment, or, I have a big emergency fund lined up. So I feel like you have lots of time if you're trying to pursue fire to get a plan in place and to prepare yourself for the unexpected. What can happen if something happens to me or my partner, or what if, whatever, we're unable to go back to work, or what if something happens with the market? You can kind of address all these things. So I feel like that is great. And also, I think it's good to really narrow down your investment strategy. For me, diversification is so important. I love to diversify and not put all my eggs in one basket. So you definitely want to make sure that, well, for me, I'm making sure that I'm investing in certain like taxable accounts, tax deferred accounts. So if I'm putting my money in a Roth IRA, then that is already income that's already been taxed. And when you deposit, when you contribute money into, say, an IRA, for example, a Roth IRA, you can withdraw that contribution at any time with no taxable penalty. So that's something. But of course, obviously the growth, you want to wait, or you'll have to get charged that 10%. So just kind of knowing those things, having a plan lined up. For me, I'm definitely going to be doing some real estate investing as well, and making sure that I have access to liquid cash. But for sure, I'm definitely going to be working out a tax strategy. And for me, it's not enough to, I guess, deter me from fire.
I can hear your determination. So, something we haven't covered is the rising cost of healthcare. So how does that play into traditional retirement versus fire? Nicole, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. So healthcare is that sticky wicket, right? Healthcare expenses, they rise faster than inflation. And recent studies, depending on the ones you look at, it's estimated to be anywhere between 6 and 8%. Healthcare is often one of the biggest expenses also in one's later years, with the average out-of-pocket expenses estimated in the six figures. Recently, Fidelity did a study, and they reported that the average, and again, we'll use that, average couple will need $285,000 in today's dollars for medical expenses in retirement. And that doesn't even include long-term care and the cost of that. So if you remember back around that whole 4% withdrawal rate, unfortunately, that 4% rule would fail to cover actual healthcare expenses. So if you couple that with that future costs for retirees or for older people tend to rise sharply as people age and tend to need more medical care. So if I think about a lot of fire retirees, they're going to need to buy health insurance, right? One way or another for potentially decades. until they're eligible for Medicare. And depending upon their situation, that can be extremely costly. And it can also inflate at a higher rate than their budget would allow. So while it can, for me, it can sound really tempting to retire in your 30s or 40s, ultimately, as Chauncey said, and I'm so happy to hear this, the planner in me celebrates you, that you're going to need a plan, like a solid financial plan in place to ensure that you have sufficient funds to live comfortably for many years, especially when you think about healthcare and the impact that's going to have on your replacement rate or your budget as you grow older.
Chauncey, I know you have a unique approach to healthcare, so can you share?
Yeah. Definitely healthcare, I think, is a top concern for anyone who is pursuing FIRE, because a lot of people do get health insurance through their employers. So if you don't have an employer, there are lots of things that I've seen people do. One thing is opening a health savings account and contributing to that. These are available if you have a high deductible health insurance plan. And a lot of people actually use these for retirement savings too. But it's great because they have so many tax benefits, and you can withdraw the money without any penalties or anything for your medical expenses. So again, if you have, a couple years to plan for FIRE, I would heavily put money in a health savings account if you have that available to you. I've seen people do all types of things and get really creative with health insurance when it comes to FIRE. Some people decided to go back to school and use the health insurance from the school. Say maybe you've always wanted to study humanities or something and you never had time. You could be a part-time student. Some people have gotten part-time jobs at Starbucks and things like that. And also, again, going back to if your income when you're in FIRE is lower than what it was before, you may be able to qualify for certain deductions on your health insurance premiums. Again, there's no telling, what the future is going to look like, or what healthcare will look like. And then another option that I have actually done and considered is a health sharing ministry. It's not for everyone, but it works similar to health insurance. Basically, you would pay a monthly membership fee, which acts as your premium. And then you would have what's called an annual unshared amount, which is around like $500 per person, depending on the type of plan that you get. And how it works is you choose how much you want coverage, and it's not really health insurance, but you put in your membership payment every month and it gets pooled with other people's, and then your medical costs get shared from a sense. So say you're paying, $500 a month for your family, which is not bad, and you don't have any medical visits or bills. That money is going to go toward someone else's expenses. And then when you go to the doctor and you have a bill, then, everyone else's money gets shared to pay your bill. So I did this in 2015 with Liberty Health Share because I didn't really like the insurance that was offered through my employer at the time. And I did end up having a little outpatient surgery. It was around like $13,000, the bill. And I sent it to them and it was shared. It was covered. So no, it's not a scam. It does work. There's no like networks, but it's not really technically insurance, so it's not going to be for everyone. There's certain requirements and things like that. But even getting involved in that or using that as supplemental insurance, when you're younger might not be a bad idea as an investment, because as you get older, you could start, your health can decline and then you start having pre-existing conditions. But I feel like, if you're going to hit FIRE in your 30s or whatever, it's not a bad idea to consider.
Nicole, any thoughts on that, on what she said?
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that she's thinking of unique and creative ways for it. Like Chauncey said, some of those group savings plans aren't for anybody. They can be super restrictive, especially on the payout side. So like Chauncey did, I would encourage anybody who's looking into that to do their research onto what it actually will pay out. I've also heard of folks getting eco-tour or medical tourism, as an extreme way to cover their health care. And again, I just think that while these are unique and creative ways, it's something that you need to plan for, especially if you choose to pursue FIRE and you're living lean FIRE. The thought of an unexpected medical expense derailing it can do just that. And then all of those reasons that I talked about, like how it could backfire, could really start to snowball.
All right. Before we go to questions, I want to give Nicole and Chauncey a chance to give their final words on why we should pick the traditional route or FIRE. So let's start with Nicole.
All right. Well, I think, unexpected events that we were just talking about is one thing. They can sabotage any retirement, and the impact that they would have on an early retirement is even greater. So for me, a traditional retirement and traditional retirement planning depends on lots of many small decisions and assumptions that aren't going to hold true for long. However, with traditional retirement planning, you have time to recover from some of those disruptions. The stock market, housing market, interest rates, and inflation rates will continue to do what they do. They'll rise, they'll fall, and they're unpredictable. Marriages don't always last, and people don't always stay healthy. So if you think through FIRE and you're all rowing in the same direction, you have to plan for these things. The lifestyle that seems reasonable at 30 is probably not the one you want to be living and loving at age 65. So for me, additional income that most people who are practicing FIRE, that they're going to rely upon to supplement their journey, that may never materialize. Or that side hustle that they had may actually evaporate. So 1,000 little circumstances could sabotage the future that you envision. And this can happen for FIRE or traditional. So for me, it's really important. I've said it once, I've said it twice. Planning for any retirement is important. So I'm going to leave you with my favorite quote, and that is simply, a goal without a plan is simply a wish. So please turn your wishes into actual goals and have a plan.
Thank you, Nicole. How about you, Chauncey? What are your final words?
Well, I think that FIRE is so attractive because it offers freedom and it offers flexibility, especially here in the US, where we have some of the worst employee benefits, and we're always overworking ourselves. It's hard for us to take time off, to take the vacation hours that we earned. And I feel like if you have a plan and you diversify and, get your family on board, that FIRE could be a reality for you. And even if you hit FIRE and you're 35 and something happens or you find out that, you can always go get another job. The workforce is evolving. A lot more people are projected to be freelancers. We have the internet. The internet is not just going to go away. There are ways to earn passive income. And I feel like it gives you just more control over your money and your life, and, and the choice, not to live in fear of the future and what could happen. I feel like, what's the worst that can happen? Maybe you have to go back and get a part-time job or something. But then think about what's the best that can happen. What is your best life? What does it look like day to day? That's basically my stance on it.
Thank you, Chauncey. All right, everybody, it's up to you. Brian, can you help us with the poll? Do we have that now? So what are people willing to give up to retire early?
Yes, and I'm really glad that you came back to that. And I do understand that it's hard to see in our little Zoom picture here, but I have it up on a different screen. And to me, I'm actually quite surprised by it. The new vehicle, 75% of the people were willing to give up the new vehicle compared to 14% for home ownership and 10% for vacation/entertainment. So obviously we see where the priorities are there. So I'll let you guys comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, so thank you, Brian. I don't know, Nicole and Chauncey, we just heard from our viewers what they're willing to give up. This can be done in traditional or FIRE. So what are your thoughts on that?
I agree.
Yeah, sorry, Chauncey. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree with the people who mentioned they give up the new car.
Yeah, I would agree too. I think it's all about priorities, and vehicles last a long time these days. And the running joke is, if you think about Warren Buffett, who's I think done well for himself, he was driving his 1982 Toyota Camry until the wheels fell off. So I'm right there with everyone, giving up that car.
Thumbs up, right? Okay, so Brian, before we go to questions, I just wanted to do one final poll on, we've had this discussion on traditional versus FIRE. So has that shifted anyone's decision on when they want to retire? So please go to our live poll and answer this last question. Do you think you'll retire before 40, between 40 to 65, or after 65? So as you go and pick your answer, I'll toss it to you so that, Brian, so that you can start giving some of our questions.
All right, so that poll is up and running. I got that on my other screen. Let me turn over here. And we have a lot of questions that have came in. What a great debate on both sides. I don't know who won. I'd hate to have to pick a winner. But Natasha is the first one to actually jump in here. And Natasha says, what suggestions do you have for those who want to pursue FIRE but live in a high cost of living area? And she mentions that she lives in New Jersey, just outside of New York. And whoever wants to jump in, feel free.
I can jump in. I think there are certain areas where in the country where FIRE is easier to achieve because the cost of living isn't so high. But I live in a state where the cost of living is pretty high, but I live in the Chicago area, but I would never live in Chicago, if that makes sense. I save so much money and I live about 45 minutes away. So I would just, say to ask yourself, how comfortable are you saving in every other area? Maybe you want to stay there, but maybe you can cut costs by using public transit or doing other things, or maybe there's a ton of free stuff to do in your area, once things get better after this pandemic. But I would definitely focus on the other big areas that you could save in, or I would consider possibly relocating to a nearby suburb. And you would be surprised, when I moved out to this area to work for one of my jobs. It was a 25-minute commute with my car. And if I had worked right by my employer, hundreds of dollars more, in housing. So and 25 minutes isn't a bad drive. So I would explore other areas and, see what you're open to.
All right. So Jay Garcia is up next. And definitely, I do think that Jay Garcia receives the participation award today. A lot of great questions. So overall, here's Jay Garcia. Here's the question. What are your go-to or favorite tools or sites to help you figure out your budgeting? I guess that would go to Chauncey.
Yeah. I am kind of like an old-fashioned person. I like just pen to paper and using a spreadsheet. I have used tools before, like You Need a Budget, YNAB. I think that's great for just tracking like everything that you earn and also helping you stop living paycheck to paycheck. It really is if you're considering FIRE, it's great to use because it sets you up that way you're living on last month's income. So, for us, it was great because it helped us stop living paycheck to paycheck because it's set up to help you pay off debt. And they do have a free trial. So yeah, if you're serious about budgeting and you want to be honest and open about everything you're spending money on and give every dollar a purpose, YNAB is a great resource. And also just, I think, in terms of tools, there's so many apps and programs, but I think the key is to make sure that you're checking in with your budget, at least every week and making sure you're following up. It's one thing just to be like, okay, this is what I'm spending or this is what my budget is, but then to just leave it and not go back and, review every month.
And I think one of the better usernames today, I'm going to go to Curious George 55, and I guess we'll send this one over to Nicole. Does your age matter when deciding which retirement path to take? But everybody can jump in, but I'll start with Nicole.
Yeah, so I'll start that one off, right? So in traditional retirement planning, of course, it's always better to start early. Everyone's going to say that, right? FIRE or traditional. However, I think in traditional, there really is no set age. There's hurdles that you need to overcome at any age. There are impacts that every age decade brings that you can plan for in traditional retirement. So for me, earlier is better, but I've also been able to talk to individuals that wanted to retire 2 to 3 years from when they came to me. And we were able to, with some sacrifices, get them to where they needed to be for retiring in a few years.
All right. And Nicole, if you stop sharing your screen, we'll be able to see the poll a little bit better. And while you're doing that, I'm going to come back to Slam Dunker. So we're getting some creative usernames here at the end of the program, fittingly. What's the most common mistake made by people when trying to go fire?
I think we discussed it in this debate. It would be not planning, not preparing for different options. Life could take you in a different direction, not really taking the dream or the idea of fire and not really having a plan, not running your numbers, not talking to someone, a tax professional. There's a lot of steps you have to take. And it should be exciting, because as you take those steps, you get closer and closer to really motivating yourself that you have a real plan and a process that you can stick with. Another problem or another mistake I see a lot of people make, and that I made too in the beginning, is just being too strict on yourself. I believe that, we're here now. This is the only promised moment, and it's okay to enjoy a little bit now and make sure you have a realistic budget for yourself, because I feel like you would just beat yourself up if you gave yourself this unrealistic goal to achieve and every month you failed at it, So for me, I like coffee. I like to, get lunch sometimes. So I'm not going to put that into my plan. And yeah, if I rode a bike to work or wherever, I would just probably pass out because I'm not in good shape for that. So I'm like, we need at least one car, but I feel like try not to go too frugal and to the point where like you hate your life, and also take the time to plan and prepare for the unexpected.
All right. Okay. So we're running a little bit short on time, but you can still submit questions into the chat box if you'd like. But I'm going to go back to Jay Garcia. And Jay asks one last question here, and then let's look at the poll. And we got the poll up and running. I'll pass it back to Jack. What was your expected retirement age before you started FIRE, and how has it changed since living the FIRE lifestyle? What a great question.
That is a great question. Honestly, I don't think I had an expected retirement age before FIRE. I think I might have just expected like, oh, I'll just, retire at 65 like everyone else. But in college, I worked a job that I was really unhappy at. And I don't want to say this the wrong way, but a lot of my coworkers were older people in their retirement age. And I always told myself that I didn't want to have to work at a job that I don't like or somewhere that drains me. So I kind of figured that out in college, that I didn't really know about the FIRE movement, but I kind of had it in me in college. Like, I don't want to be older, traditional retirement age, working at a job that's not like fulfilling to me.
All right. So Jack, I think we can show the poll at this point in time.
Yeah, let's do that poll.
Right. And then we're going to go into closing remarks, and we need everybody to stick around during those closing remarks. But here's your poll. I think you can see it, right?
Let's see. It looks like most people they want to do, is that 40 to 65?
That is correct.
All right. So that is aspirational. Good. So
right. That's 69% that I see here by looking at my other screen.
Okay.
Then
so
28% after 65 and only 3% before 40.
So Chauncey, I don't know. A lot of people may not be ready for that lean FIRE movement of giving up everything before 40. So, but I think overall, what we've heard from Nicole and Chauncey is that, this retirement journey, it's up to you, and it may require some sacrifice, but the goal is to start, and the goal is to have a plan. So thank you, Chauncey. Thank you, Nicole.